Hank Williams Jr., that name gets you started real good in some ways, and it also closes the door.
Country music gave the world heart-touching songs and legends that shaped history. But behind the guitars and cowboy hats, not every star lived up to the glory. Some were arrogant, some lived wild, and others left behind stories filled with betrayal and scandal. This countdown reveals 21 of the biggest troublemakers and most notorious figures in old country music history. From barroom brawls to shocking backstabs, these stars didn't just make headlines, they carved out reputations you'll never forget. Number 1, Charlie Rich. Charlie Rich was once known as the Silver Fox, a smooth crooner with crossover hits like Behind Closed Doors and The Most Beautiful Girl. But in 1975, he torched more than just the charts. He nearly burned his career. At the Country Music Association Awards, Rich stumbled on stage to present Entertainer of the Year. Clearly drunk and out of control, he fumbled through the nominees, ripped open the envelope, and then, in front of millions, pulled out a lighter and set the card on fire. The winner? John Denver. Instead of celebrating him, Rich literally burned his name. Some called it rebellion, a protest against Denver's pop country sound. Others said it was just a drunken stunt. Rich later claimed he was over-medicated, but nobody was buying that excuse. The damage was done. Nashville turned its back, and his career never recovered. While Rich had the hits, the Grammys, and the nickname Silver Fox, that one fiery stunt at the Country Music Association Awards branded him as reckless, arrogant, and out of touch. In the end, Charlie Rich didn't just burn an envelope, he burned his own legacy. Number 2, Faron Young. Faron Young was called the hillbilly heartthrob, but behind the charm was a man who often acted completely different. His voice carried him through 3 decades, with hits like Hello Walls and It's 4 in the Morning, but his offstage behavior was another story entirely. In 1972, at a live show, Young was so drunk and angry that he spanked a girl in the audience after she spat on him. And that was just the beginning. At home, fights with his wife often turned violent. Once, during a drunken argument, he pulled out a pistol and fired it into the ceiling. He later divorced her after 34 years, blaming her while refusing to face his own addiction. Young's alcoholism fueled bar brawls, public gunplay, and endless industry feuds. He insulted Nashville's power players, complained the world abandoned him, and burned bridges faster than he built them. To many, he wasn't just a fallen star. He was a bitter, reckless man who drowned his talent in booze and rage. By the time he ended his life at 64, Faron Young had left behind great songs and a reputation as one of country music's most self-destructive icons. Number 3, Tom T. Hall. Tom T. Hall may have been called the storyteller, but behind the fame, his story was far darker than the folksy songs he wrote. Sure, he penned classics like Harper Valley PTA and racked up hits that put him in the Country Music Hall of Fame. But behind the shiny awards was a man who often rubbed people the wrong way. His song, I Love, might sound innocent, but fans caught on quickly, with lyrics about grass and a line swap that smelled a lot like a Substance reference. Tom brushed it off, but people weren't buying the aw shucks act. Then came the downfall. After his wife Dixie died, Hall spiraled. He relied on prescription meds for anxiety, fueling whispers that he couldn't handle life without a chemical crutch. By 2021, the so-called storyteller ended his own story with a gunshot, alone at 85. And while Hall left a mark on country music, the truth is, he wasn't just the gentle songwriter people loved to quote. He was stubborn, reckless, and sometimes full of himself. Number 4, Merle Haggard. Merle Haggard is remembered as a country legend, but his road to fame was paved with crime, controversy, and sharp edges. Before he ever stepped on stage, he was a runaway kid, skipping school, stealing cars, and writing bad checks. His wild streak landed him in and out of reform schools, and by age 20, he was behind bars at San Quentin for burglary after a botched escape from another jail. That prison stretch defined him, giving him both scars and stories that later fueled his outlaw image. But even after turning his life around, Haggard kept stirring up trouble. His 1969 hit, Okie from Muskogee, became an anthem for people sick of hippies and anti-war protesters. To his critics, it sounded like a middle finger to anyone daring to question America's choices. Then came The Fightin' Side of Me, another fiery song that told protesters to love the country or leave it. Yet Haggard was never easy to pin down. He wrote Irma Jackson, a bold interracial love song, only for his record label to bury it. He was complicated, combative, and brilliant. And whether you loved or hated him, Merle Haggard made damn sure you remembered his name. Number 5. Johnny Paycheck. Johnny Paycheck was one of country music's wildest outlaws, a man whose songs captured the working man's struggle, but whose personal life spun out of control. Born Donald Eugene Lytle in Greenfield, Ohio, he rose from humble roots, playing music as a teenager and eventually singing alongside legends like Ray Price, George Jones, and Faron Young. By the mid-60s, he reinvented himself, and soon after came the hits, including his anthem, She's All I Got. But while his music climbed the charts, his personal life was a storm. He wrestled with alcohol, money troubles, and a string of scandals that made him infamous. In 1981, he faced a shocking statutory mistreatment charge involving a 12-year-old in Wyoming. The charge was later reduced to a misdemeanor, and he walked away with a fine, but his reputation was forever scarred. The night that almost destroyed Johnny Paycheck's life came in 1985. Inside a bar in Hillsboro, Ohio, a heated argument turned violent. In a flash of anger, Paycheck pulled out a gun and fired. The bullet grazed a man's head, and the country singer who once topped the charts now found himself convicted of aggravated mistreatment. He was sent to prison, but luck, or perhaps fame, stepped in. The governor later commuted his sentence, cutting his time behind bars short. But this wasn't his only brush with trouble. Years earlier, during his Navy days, he faced a court-martial for assault. On another occasion, a brawl on an airplane ended with a flight attendant suing him for slander. And as if the legal battles weren't enough, the IRS came knocking. Drowning in unpaid taxes, Paycheck was forced to declare bankruptcy, watching his fortune collapse before his eyes. Through the chaos of fights, lawsuits, and prison walls, Johnny Paycheck lived a life on the edge. He was reckless, unpredictable, and self-destructive. Yet, despite it all, he still stood tall as one of country music's unforgettable outlaws. Number 6. David Allan Coe. David Allan Coe has long been called the outlaw's outlaw in country music, a man who lived wild, sang without filter, and refused to follow anyone's rules. But his biggest claim to infamy didn't come from his rough voice or rebellious lifestyle. It came from 2 underground albums that nearly destroyed his career. In the early 80s, Coe released Nothing Sacred and Underground. Sold only through biker magazines, these albums were filled with lyrics so racist, misogynistic, and obscene that even the outlaw crowd turned their backs. He sang about white women sleeping with black men, used racial slurs, and laced his songs with vulgar themes. To critics, this was poison. Nashville wanted nothing to do with him, and his reputation as a serious artist took a brutal hit. For years, Coe faced backlash, accused of being racist and hateful. He tried to explain it away, claiming he was young and ignorant when he wrote those songs, insisting he never held racist beliefs. He even pointed out that his touring band at the time included a black drummer, but the damage was done. His personal life was just as chaotic. Married 6 times, Coe's relationships were just as stormy. He even survived a terrifying 2013 car crash that left him with broken ribs and bruised kidneys, only to crawl back on stage months later. David Allan Coe may have inspired countless musicians, but his name will always carry the shadow of scandal and rebellion. Number 7. Porter Wagoner. Porter Wagoner wasn't just known for his flashy rhinestone suits and tall blonde hair. He was also one of country music's most controversial stars. The drama began when his young singing partner, Dolly Parton, left the Porter Wagoner show to chase her solo dreams. Their split wasn't smooth. Wagoner felt betrayed, and he hit back with a $3 million lawsuit, claiming Dolly had broken their contract and that he deserved a cut of her earnings for life. The case was settled quietly, but Parton later admitted she gave him the first $1 million she ever made just to put the fight behind them. Ironically, her heartfelt song, I Will Always Love You, written as a thank you to Wagoner, became one of the most famous breakup songs in history. But that wasn't the end of the storms around Wagoner. He ruffled feathers at the Grand Ole Opry in the late 60s when he invited James Brown to perform, a move that shocked many in the conservative country scene. Some Opry members openly opposed having a black soul star on stage, but Wagoner stood by his decision, even producing an album for soul singer Joe Simon, arguing that country and soul weren't so different after all. Behind the spotlight, Wagoner also struggled with messy personal relationships. He was married twice, though his second marriage was essentially over decades before the divorce papers were signed. He reportedly clashed when his earlier girl singer, Norma Jean, wanted to leave the show, echoing the same conflict that would later unfold with Dolly. Through lawsuits, scandals, and bold choices that split audiences, Porter Wagoner built a legacy that was as dramatic as his sparkling suits. When he died of lung cancer in 2007, he left behind not just hit songs, but a stormy history that still sparks debate in country music. Number 8. Conway Twitty. Conway Twitty was the voice of romance. With classics like Hello Darlin', You've Never Been This Far Before, and Linda on My Mind, he made fans feel like he was singing directly to them. His smooth delivery, tender lyrics, and emotional performances earned him the nickname, the High Priest of Country Music, a title he proudly carried on his 33rd album. But behind the love songs and the spotlight, Conway's life was far more complicated. While fans saw him as kind, generous, and approachable, always staying after shows to sign autographs and living a simple, down-to-earth lifestyle, others whispered about his diva-like demands and rumored romantic scandals. To some in the industry, he could be as difficult as he was talented. His personal life was just as full of passion. Married 3 times, Conway found his greatest support in his second wife, Mickey, who became both his partner and confidant. Family meant everything to him, and despite his fame, he kept his home life grounded and focused on the people he loved most. But after his death, that same devotion to family turned into bitter division. Instead of celebrating his legacy, relatives were locked in a nasty legal battle over his estate, threatening to overshadow the very music that had made him a legend. Still, Conway Twitty's voice was too powerful to be silenced by scandal. In 1999, he was inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame, securing his place in history. Number 9. Marty Robbins. Marty Robbins is remembered as one of country music's smoothest voices, a man who gave us timeless hits like El Paso. But behind the fame, his story carried controversy and risk that made him one of the most complicated figures in old country music. In the 60s, Robbins shocked many with his song Ain't I Right. This song was a fiery political anthem that slammed civil rights activists and anti-war protesters, painting them as communists out to destroy America. His record label, Columbia, refused to touch it, calling it too extreme. But Robbins believed in it so much that he released it under a fake name, Johnny Freedom, and sold it in the South, where it stirred both praise and anger. The move cemented his reputation as a hard right voice in country music, closely tied to Barry Goldwater's conservative politics. Robbins also carried his rebellious streak into another passion, NASCAR. He wasn't just a singer, he was a race car driver, hungry for the thrill of speed. But in 1973, he admitted to cheating in a race by removing the carburetor restrictors, which gave his car illegal speed. His reason? He said he just wanted to know what it felt like to run up front for once. The confession made headlines and added another layer of scandal to his career. But Robbins' story was also about the heart. He battled severe heart disease for years, surviving multiple heart attacks before his final one claimed his life at just 57 years old. Marty Robbins left behind more than 500 songs, 50 albums, 2 Grammys, and a place in the Country Music Hall of Fame. At number 10, Jerry Lee Lewis. Jerry Lee Lewis was known as the Killer, and not just for the way he attacked a piano. His music set stages on fire with hits like Great Balls of Fire and Whole Lotta Shakin' Going On. But behind the spotlight was a storm of scandal, violence, and chaos that earned him one of the most notorious reputations in music history. In 1958, Lewis shocked the world when he married his 13-year-old cousin, Myra. The scandal exploded while he was touring in Britain, bringing his career to a sudden halt. From that moment on, Jerry Lee's name was linked with controversy as much as music. The trouble didn't stop there. He was married 7 times, some marriages overlapping, others tainted with bigamy. His personal life was a whirlwind of broken vows, substance binges, and alcohol-fueled destruction. At one point, Lewis even shot his own bass player during a fight, nearly killing him. Then came the infamous night at Graceland. Drunk, armed with a gun, and demanding to see Elvis Presley, Lewis was arrested right at the gates of the King's home. It was another headline in a long line of reckless acts that painted him as dangerous, wild, and unstoppable. Despite the chaos, Lewis still racked up gold records, Grammy Awards, and a place in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But for many, the legacy of the Killer isn't just about his music. It's about the scandals, the violence, and the dangerous life. Number 11, Buck Owens. Buck Owens may have been the king of the Bakersfield Sound, But behind the flashy rhinestone suits and hit records was a man with plenty of drama and a reputation that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. For starters, he carried on a bitter feud with Merle Haggard that lasted nearly 4 decades. The bad blood wasn't just about music. It got personal when Haggard married Buck's ex-wife, Bonnie Owens. The two legends refused to share a stage for 37 years, proving pride mattered more than peace. Owens' personal life was just as messy. He married 4 times, divorced 3 times, and even rushed into a marriage with fiddler Jana J. Grief, only to annul it within days, then remarry her, then divorce again. And then came Hee Haw. While the corny TV show made Owens a household name, it also made him a joke in the eyes of hardcore fans who thought he'd sold out. Instead of standing tall as the Bakersfield rebel, he leaned into slapstick skits and banjo gags, leaving many to wonder if he'd traded artistry for cheap laughs. Buck Owens built a country music empire, but his ego, grudges, and messy choices made him just as famous for being difficult as for being great. Number 12. Willie Nelson. Willie Nelson is celebrated as the red-headed outlaw of country music, but his story is without scandals that paint him as more reckless than legendary. In 1990, the IRS stormed in and seized nearly everything he owned, mansions, ranches, even recording equipment, after claiming he owed over $32 million in back taxes. Nelson blamed it all on shady accountants and greedy managers, but critics say he was too busy smoking weed and playing the rebel to care about the fine print. His solution? He released an album called The IRS Tapes, Who'll Buy My Memories, literally asking fans to bail him out. And Nelson has never shied away from stirring the pot. His lifelong obsession with marijuana has made him an icon to some, but to others, it's proof that he cared more about getting high than holding on to dignity. More recently, his refusal to celebrate Pride Month caused a storm of backlash, with fans accusing him of being out of touch and hypocritical, preaching freedom, but picking and choosing who deserves it. Sure, Willie Nelson helped define outlaw country, but behind the braids and the charm, he was a man who dodged responsibility, sparked endless controversy, and left plenty of people wondering if his outlaw image was just an excuse to be careless. Number 13. Loretta Lynn. Often called the coal miner's daughter, Loretta Lynn stirred up more controversy than almost anyone in country music. From the start, she wasn't afraid to turn her personal mess into music. Don't Come Home A-Drinkin' was a jab at her husband's habits, while Fist City was a not-so-subtle threat to any woman daring to look his way. Then came The Pill, a song about birth control that got banned on radio stations nationwide, yet she basked in the outrage as it climbed the charts. In her autobiography, she aired every detail of her stormy marriage, almost bragging about the chaos that fueled her songs. And decades later, she angered fans again when she proudly threw her support behind Donald Trump, calling him the only one who could turn this country around. Loretta Lynn wasn't just bold, she was brash, defiant, and never cared who she offended. Number 14. Waylon Jennings. Waylon Jennings was a legend of outlaw country, but he lived up to the outlaw part a little too well. In 1977, federal agents busted him when a package of a preferred substance showed up in his recording studio. Instead of owning up, Waylon stalled the raid long enough to flush and hide the substance, proving he had the arrogance of a man who thought he could outsmart the law. His battles with substances and prescription pills weren't private. They played out in the tabloids and on stage, where his addiction chewed up years of his life and left his health in ruins. But perhaps his most notorious stunt came in 1985, when he walked out of the We Are the World recording session because he refused to sing one line in Swahili, scoffing that no good old boy sings in Swahili. Waylon Jennings wasn't just a rebel, he was arrogant and sometimes downright offensive. Number 15. Hank Williams Sr. Hank Williams is remembered as one of country music's greatest legends, a man whose songs still echo with raw pain and truth. But behind his timeless music was a life unraveling in scandal, addiction, and heartbreak. From the beginning, Hank fought demons. A back injury from a rodeo accident in 1941 left him in constant pain, and after a failed spinal surgery a decade later, he turned to painkillers and alcohol. What started as a way to cope soon consumed him. His drinking became notorious, and his career began to crumble under the weight of his addiction. By 1941, his behavior got so bad that he was fired from his radio show on WSFA for habitual drunkenness. A decade later, the Grand Ole Opry, the crown jewel of country music, banished him for missing shows and showing up too drunk to perform. His personal life fared no better. His marriage to Audrey Shepherd was fiery and unstable, plagued by arguments and fueled by his drinking. The relationship eventually collapsed in divorce, leaving Hank more isolated than ever. Yet, even in his darkest hours, Hank poured his heartbreak into his music. Songs like "I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry" revealed the torment eating away at him. But by the age of 29, his body gave out. Number 16, Tammy Wynette. Known as the First Lady of country music, Tammy Wynette's story is soaked in scandal and contradiction. Her biggest hit, "Stand By Your Man," was hailed as a classic, yet many saw it as an anthem of submission, a slap in the face to the growing women's rights movement. Decades later, Hillary Clinton even dragged the song back into controversy, blasting it as a message that told women to stay small. Then the chapters got darker, when Wynette claimed she'd been kidnapped at gunpoint, beaten, and left by the roadside. The world gasped until her own daughter later revealed she believed it was a lie, a cover-up for abuse at the hands of Wynette's controlling husband, George Ritchie. In addition to years of crippling health issues, a spiraling addiction to painkillers, and a wrongful death lawsuit accusing Ritchie and her doctors of enabling her decline, Tammy's legacy is as messy as it is unforgettable. She sang about loyalty, but behind the spotlight, Tammy Wynette's life was a storm of secrets, pain, and drama. Number 17, Roger Miller. Roger Miller, the man who gave us King of the Road and Dang Me, wasn't just the witty genius fans adored, he was also a mess behind the curtain. His sharp humor and wild talent came with a price. Miller wrestled with substance and alcohol abuse so badly that it wrecked his first 2 marriages and left his personal life in shambles. He even called that era of his life a snake pit, and it showed. But the chaos didn't stop there. For all his brilliance, Miller was infamously undisciplined. He left songs half-finished, tossed away golden lyrics, or simply handed them off to other writers like they meant nothing. It was the behavior of a man too reckless to value his own gifts. While Roger Miller was a country music legend, behind the charm and jokes was a self-destructive streak that nearly consumed everything he built. Number 18, George Jones. George Jones was hailed as the Rolls-Royce of country music, a man whose voice could cut straight through the soul. With hits like White Lightning, The Race Is On, and A Good Year for the Roses, he became one of the most respected singers of his time. But behind the microphone, George Jones lived a life of chaos, addiction, and heartbreak. For decades, Jones battled severe alcoholism and substance abuse. His self-destruction became so legendary that fans nicknamed him No Show Jones because he often missed concerts and recording sessions. His erratic behavior frustrated everyone around him, and his reputation became as much about disaster as it was about music. His addiction fueled bizarre and reckless stunts. In one infamous story, his wife Tammy Wynette hid his car keys to keep him from drinking. Instead of giving up, Jones climbed onto a 10-horsepower riding lawnmower and drove 8 miles to the liquor store. That single event cemented his outlaw image forever. His marriage to Wynette was fiery. They were hailed as the country's king and queen, but behind closed doors, their relationship was filled with fighting, fueled by Jones's drinking. Their eventual divorce only added more tragedy to the legend. Jones burned through money, faced crippling financial troubles, and at one point lived in his car. A car crash while drunk nearly ended him, but it also became the wake-up call that led him to sobriety later in life. George Jones left behind a voice for the ages, but his demons left scars that country music will never forget. Number 19, Johnny Cash. Known as the Man in Black, Johnny Cash's life carried plenty of shadows. His biggest struggle was with substance and alcohol addiction. For years, Cash battled pills and hard living, which led to several arrests, including one for smuggling prescription pills across the border. At his lowest point, he even attempted to take his life before finally finding stretches of sobriety. His personal life was just as stormy. His first marriage to Vivian Liberto was torn apart by his substance use, constant touring, and his affair with June Carter. That affair, though scandalous at the time, later turned into one of country music's most famous love stories when Cash and Carter married. But perhaps the darkest moment came in 1965. On a binge in his camper van, Cash accidentally caused a fire in California's Los Padres National Wildlife Refuge. The flames wiped out acres of land and nearly destroyed the already endangered California condor population. When confronted, Cash infamously shrugged it off, showing just how far his recklessness had taken him. Through it all, he remained a legend. His deep voice, his black clothes, his rebellious spirit, and his prison concerts carved his name into country music forever. Number 20, Hank Williams Jr. Hank Williams Jr., like his legendary father, carried both fame and controversy. His career was rocked by reckless behavior, outspoken politics, and brushes with death. In 1975, a mountain climbing fall nearly killed him, leaving him with a severe substance and alcohol-fueled lifestyle. His big mouth also made headlines. He compared President Obama to Hitler on Fox News, costing him his ESPN gig, and later doubled down with songs like Take a Knee, Take a Hike, and the provocative If the South Would Have Won. Following his father's footsteps, Hank built a career on defiance, scandal, and survival. Number 21, Lefty Frizzell. Lefty Frizzell was one of country music's most influential voices, inspiring legends like George Jones, Merle Haggard, and Willie Nelson. But his troubles started early. At just 19 years old, Frizzell was arrested and convicted of statutory mistreatment involving a 14-year-old girl in New Mexico. He spent 6 months in jail, where he wrote "I Love You 1,000 Ways" as an apology to his wife, Alice. But the shame of that crime followed him for the rest of his life. His behavior didn't improve. In 1951, while performing at the Grand Ole Opry, he was arrested again, this time for contributing to the delinquency of a minor, though he escaped prosecution. Alcoholism soon became his constant companion, leading to reckless driving, violent mood swings, and cruel outbursts. Those closest to him described him as a mean drunk, prone to infidelity and abuse. Worse still, Frizzell carried a reputation for racism. Fellow country star Charlie Pride recalled asking him for help tuning a guitar, only to be told, "I don't tune guitars for niggas." Another story claimed that after hearing Stoney Edwards' heartfelt tribute song, Lefty was reduced to tears before muttering another racial slur. In addition to bitter contract disputes, lawsuits, and a reputation for unreliability, Lefty's career began to collapse under the weight of his own demons. By the time he died of a stroke at just 47, Frizzell's influence on music was undeniable, but so was the shadow of the scandals that haunted him. Which legendary country star on this list shocked you the most? Do you believe their wild choices and scandals were enough to land them here, or were they judged too harshly? Share your thoughts in the comments below.